Good morning, and thank you for joining us again. I've got Stephanie Phipps, Dr. Stephanie Phipps, with me here today. As a brief way of introduction, my name is Jack Zedlitz. I'm the Director of Professional Development at the Ronnie K. Irani Center for Energy Solutions. We are housed within Mewburn College at the University of Oklahoma, and our focus is on creating greater opportunity for all through reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy. This webinar series is being done in support of our Energy ESG Leadership Certificate Program, which starts in late October. And if you are interested, please reach out. If you'd like more information, at the top right of your screen, there's a QR code that you can scan. And at the bottom in the middle, there's a website you can go to. So without further delay, Dr. Stephanie Phipps, who is with me today, is a professor of professional practice and management at Oklahoma State University's Spears School of Business. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Industrial and Organizational Psychology from Missouri State University, an MA in Human Relations from the University of Oklahoma, an MBA from Oklahoma Christian University, and a PhD in Business Administration from Oklahoma State University. It's quite a collection of schools, Steph.
I guess I couldn't figure out which one to land on, so I picked them all. They're all good schools.
She currently teaches management and professional development at Spears, and her dissertation work, which is largely the topic of our conversation today, was completed in the area of organizational culture, private equity, and leadership attributes. Current research interest falls in the area of organizational culture, executive leadership, and corporate social responsibility. So my first question for you really has to do with your research. As you know, we focus on ESG for energy professionals, and we often see that there's an overemphasis on E and less of an emphasis on S and G. And I understand that your research kind of really does emphasize the S, the social part of ESG. So would you mind describing your PhD research and how it relates to our program?
Oh, absolutely. So yes, my research, and my dissertation was specifically on private equity and organizational culture and the components of that, but also a secondary research work that I'm doing lies squarely in corporate social responsibility, which is in essence the same terminology we use for ESG today. So the academic research stream calls it CSR. What we have now defined in cultural terms as ESG is a component of that. And so what I've looked at is really what is the impact of CSR or ESG on the bottom line. And I kind of not ignored, but didn't let the aspect of compliance or even risk as it relates to regulations play into the thought process there. I was really looking at it just through a clear lens of if you introduced and you act on CSR initiatives or ESG initiatives, and specifically around the S, what does that mean for your bottom line? Does it have any impact at all? And there is a long stream of research in this area that shows that it does have an impact. It's a positive impact on firm performance. Now, does that mean that companies that enact an ESG plan next year have greater financial performance than they did the year before? No, what it means is that it gives them a competitive advantage within the external market and competition that they live in for that particular period of time. So it gives you a competitive advantage, assuming that you align those objectives within your ESG plan to the culture that you're trying to develop, and it also ties to the business strategy. So it's aligning all of those pieces together that really makes the difference.
So, right now, ESG is kind of seen as a cost center for companies that are adopting sustainability plans, but your research is saying over the long term, if you align several aspects of management strategy, that can turn into a competitive advantage. Will you kind of dive into that a bit more?
You bet. So I think part of that vision that you hear, that it's a cost center, and it's one of the things that we just have to do to stay in good graces with regulatory agencies and maybe some of our shareholders and external stakeholders. But if you look at it outside of that lens, and more in the lens of creating a culture that is a culture that high degree talent wants to come to work in. I mean, that's just one angle of looking at it, that you are creating a situation, and we'll focus on the S because it's a clearly easy place to talk about where you can actually see that impact directly. So, for example, if you have initiatives that align with your employees, they come in and they say, we would like to see more outreach within our communities. We'd like the opportunity to do some volunteering. We would like the opportunity to be more involved in the benefits and the offerings that you provide as a company. If you offer, which all of that falls into some categories within the S component of ESG, if you align those values and build a program that is supported and that your employees find value in, then you're going to get better talent. And not only that, you'll be able to recruit better talent, but you'll also be able to get greater engagement from those that are there. And so, which leads long term, you kind of jump down the line to performance, which ultimately leads to greater efficiencies, greater innovation, and greater overall financial performance. It's not a direct line, and that's why a lot of times it gets confused or lost that there are elements and there is a component there that will affect the bottom line. It's just not a direct touch. It has to go through other aspects, and specifically the initiatives that you create through the ESG initiatives. So I have not approached ESG from the standpoint of it being risk mitigation. Yes, there is an element of risk mitigation that can keep you out of trouble or keep you out of the courts and legal fees and things like that, or regulators' fines. There's a component, but I've really focused on it more from the standpoint of how do we align with our stakeholders that drive our performance and drive the initiative to where we're all focused on the same things and the values created are the same within the organization.
So we're really talking about culture. It takes a while to build, it takes a while to change it, and it requires, I think, a unique leadership skill. Can you speak to that part? Because I know that your work in research and consulting practice does focus on leadership. How does leadership contribute to the culture that you're describing that can drive financial performance?
Yes, we are squarely talking about culture. ESG is a component of culture, and that's whether you have an ESG program or you don't. It's still a component of the culture that you're offering and that you're trying to build. The three aspects of culture that really drive overall firm performance, and if you can find a way to align these three components, you can kind of knock it out of the park. The first component is the culture that we talked about. What are we building? What kind of an environment are we building, including that ESG plans or initiatives related to ESG? Are they aligned separately with the workforce that we've brought in? So again, an example that I give often is if you are an employer and you're looking to recruit new talent and high level talent, and you think, well, I've got to think of new benefits and perks that I can offer my employees so that I can draw in that additional talent. And let's say you create or somebody has an idea, we want to cover and pay for childcare for all of our employees. What a great program. How, it's an expensive benefit, but we're going to offer it. And then you do a demographic look and you realize, well, none of our employees or only 5% of our employees have children. So that's a huge benefit that you're offering, but it creates no value for the employees and the talent that you have. It's no different from that in an ESG program from the perspective that I'm looking at. It's you have a program that should support the ideology that you're trying to create within the organization and then the values and the interests that your employees. And I'm not leaving out if you're a public company, the shareholders and the communities that you operate in. Those are all stakeholders that are part of your business. They're not a direct part of the business piece of it itself, but they are people that will benefit and also benefit you by being involved. So you want to have programs that you believe that potentially support the communities that you live in, potentially support the interests and the values that your employees have, and then certainly your shareholders, your equity shareholders. When you find a program that works specifically to drive those initiatives or those interests, then that's where you start to see the benefit and the success on the financial performance end. The third piece that I left out of that, and this is one that does tie directly, is strategy and building your business strategy, again, that aligns with that culture, and the talent that you need to build within that culture has to come from the business strategy that you're developing. What does that look like? What are you trying to accomplish? Is it a growth strategy? Is it a cost differentiation strategy? You've got to make sure that you can get the talent within the strategy that you're trying to develop. In terms of the ESG plan itself, it's really been around a long time. We didn't call things what they are today. We didn't have ESG plans 20 years ago, but we still did community outreach. We still did and tried to identify the benefits that our employees found value in. We tried to create diversity because we realized that diversity within the organization, and I'm not just talking about those visual differences in our employees, but also those that are not so visible. So geographic location, the thing we can learn from people that come from different areas, sometimes can create new innovative ideas and enhance creativity within the organization that also drive performance. Well, all of that stuff we've been doing a really long time as organizations. It's not new, but we've slapped a label on it now that also happens to tie to a risk initiative that has been around a long time in the investing community. That the focus was strictly on evaluating risk around these areas within an organization, and then equity partners or banks might offer different opportunities or investing opportunities based on that risk. ESG has taken off on its own kind of planet these days, where it now has a much broader meaning to the general community and to businesses too. And that new meaning really encompasses a huge part of our culture.
And I'm glad you mentioned how kind of broadly the phrase or the term has started to reach in society. So ESG, it has become a phrase or a concept that is quite weaponized. But what I'm hearing you say is that the focus of your research, that your research and your data set started long before ESG was ever even conceived of, and you're saying that culture can drive financial outperformance. Can you kind of think back in your research and give us an example of a company or a couple of companies that really executed well on this over time and yielded better performance for its shareholders?
Yes, and the key there is the alignment. So yes, the research study that we have done is a longitudinal study, and we started gathering data or have gathered data from 1999, believe it or not, and so that we could see over time what performance was falling. We looked at S&P companies, so easy to get financial metrics on and compare those outcomes. And what we found is that the companies that built and invested in these initiatives, and it could be an environmental initiative, if that environmental initiative is aligned with the values and the interests of the stakeholders. Again, the stakeholders being shareholders or employees within, that can have an impact on the bottom line or the market value. But what we found is that there is a material difference, a significant difference in the financial results when you take out and hold control for environment. So the industry that company is in, and or the time frame, what's happening in the economy during that phase. There is clearly a difference in performance for CSR or ESG initiatives, like we talked about.
It's counterintuitive.
It is.
And let's think about, again, going back to leadership, aligning culture to values, aligning strategy to values, and then values to vision and mission, right? These are very deliberate and very long-term efforts. So if all of those initiatives are aligned, in what time period do you expect to see the beginnings of financial outperformance or competitive advantage?
And that's a hard question to answer. It truly depends on the organization, whether these initiatives are really rolled out throughout the organization, or if they stay at a high level. So it would be impossible to say specifically, well, you should see it in 1 year or you should see it in 6 months. The idea is that these initiatives take time to build, but one word that you use that I think you keyed in on perfectly is intentional. And so with the older programs that were developed, there were a lot of small programs. Again, think about the companies that operated in smaller towns that would go out and buy baseball uniforms for the local team or for multiple teams, or would give donations to the local hospital or to the United Way. Those are all ESG initiatives. Giving back to your community is a part of the social element of ESG. So the companies have been doing things like this for a long time, but they've just been doing them at kind of ad hoc. So as a request would come in, or if you had a leader within the organization or an employee that said, I think we should be working in this area, or I think we should have additional leave time for working families, all of that falls right under the guise of ESG. We just didn't think about it in that way. We actually have been measuring ESG elements forever. We've looked at how many resources have we provided to the community, how many, what is our diversity within our organization look like. We've been measuring this stuff for a really long time. And so it exists. We just haven't thought about it as a package deal. We've thought about it as these disparate kind of initiatives that we felt good about doing, but we didn't think about it from the standpoint of it being a single initiative, nor did we think about how it impacted the bottom line. And that's what we're starting to see now, is that people are recognizing, well, maybe there's a lot of benefit to certainly to packaging it, but also a huge benefit to communicating what we're doing. Because again, companies have expended resources for years doing good external to the organization, but they've never talked about it. And specifically with those employees who might also be engaged or excited or more tied to the organization if they knew that some of this existed.
So that concept of stakeholder communications for those interested in this program, I guess twice during the in-person week of the program, we do have a module on stakeholder engagement and communicating ESG to stakeholders, because it's all well and good for you to do well within a company, reducing emissions, et cetera. But if you are not communicating on a trending basis improvements in the metrics that stakeholders really care about, you're not going to get credit for it. And you also mentioned the word measurement, and David Ferris last week, he and I spoke about this a little bit, the concept of what gets measured gets managed. And, we were more talking about environmental aspects of ESG. setting a baseline on methane emissions, again, so you can show trending improvement over time, for example. But ESG, I think, is forcing us to measure and collect data and use it in ways that we hadn't before. We may have been collecting it all along. We weren't showing it on a trending basis. And oil and gas companies are fantastic at generating data. A lot harder to use it well. But it sounds like from your research, this concept of what gets measured gets managed over time applies to all of the social initiative as well.
That's exactly right. And if, as much as anything, it's shining a light on an area. Now, one thing you can look at all of the big write-ups that have been done on what is ESG, what are the components of E, what are the components of S, and S has a lot of components. And so as you start to look at it, you think, well, I've got all of these things that I have to do. I've got to build a plan around this element, around diversity, around communities, around safety, so there's all of these aspects. And some of those aspects are governed by state and federal law. And yes, you do have to comply with state and federal law. That's the minimum kind of threshold. However, the things that you might decide to do, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to say, we are going to go all in on every aspect of ESG. There will be elements of the E that you have to do because of compliance, but there are aspects of the E that you may want to do because it just fits in your culture and it fits with the ideology of the company and it ties to the values of the employees that you have. The same exists for S. So it may be that that you want to create a plan around employee safety. Now, there are minimum thresholds for building safety, but maybe you want to elevate that particular element of S to a much higher level. You can do that. You get to decide and build your ESG plan that fits custom to your company. One of the things that and I'll say frustrates me a little bit about the way that ESG is communicated today is it feels like that there are people that communicate that want to say, this is how you have to do it. There's only one method. And oh, by the way, if you don't do it, there's judgment, negative judgment for not doing it this way. And I think that's just really wrong. I think ESG should be looked at as any other strategic initiative that you bring into a company. Where is the value for our company? Where is it? And how do we build it? How do we build a custom plan that is the most effective for our talent internally, for the communities that we want to be involved in and in the way that we want to be involved with them, and also with any other external equity or leverage stakeholders that we might have.
And that's as you would start any major business initiative, right? What's the value proposition? What's the business case?
Exactly.
And so we're running short on time here, but I do want to ask you one question. And we do try to really emphasize the pragmatic tactics and strategies that our participants in each cohort can leave with and go back to their own companies and find near-term value in. So for those who are attempting to embed sustainability principles into their company's culture, what advice would you have for them?
I would be very thoughtful about how you go in. I would definitely look around your organization first and foremost and identify what it is you're already doing. And I guarantee you that you're doing something, whether it be on the social side. Look in your human resources group, look in your community outreach groups. I guarantee you're doing something, but identify first what you're doing. And then second, communicate to your employees what's important to you as an organization. So what is it that you want to focus on? And then see if there's some dialogue there. You might learn a lot from your employees that there are initiatives that they're very passionate about. collectively, and I'm not talking about one-offs here and there, but collectively it might be that there's an initiative that would be more meaningful to them, and therefore maybe that's something you should look more seriously into. But take credit for what you're already doing. So many really don't take the time just to take credit for what they're doing and to share that with their employees and the communities. One quick note about research, and this is related specifically to talent. A research study that came out of Penn State recently showed that that employees or individuals between the ages of 24 and 45 were driven by some ESG initiatives, particularly on the social, but it could also be the E or the G, but that they were giving weight to those values and initiatives within organizations when they made a decision on employment. Now, that doesn't mean it's the number one factor, but it is a factor. And when we are in such a highly competitive environment for talented workforce, any edge that you can give yourself is helpful in communicating that and then selling that to the potential talent that's out there.
So this is ESG as a competitive advantage for recruiting new talent.
Exactly. And certainly retaining the talent that you have, but also just getting your message out there that this is a place that aligns with the values that you care about.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this morning. And Dr. Phipps is going to be the second instructor during our in-person week. Again, late October is the last 2 weeks of October is cohort 4 of the Energy ESG Leadership Certificate Program. If you'd like to know more, again, there's a QR code at the top right of your screen that you can scan. There's a website in the bottom middle. And we would love your questions, your thoughts, your comments as this series goes along. Please feel free to contribute in that way. Dr. Phipps, thank you very much for your time, and thank you all for watching and listening today.
Thank you.